I'm Billy S, welcome to the channel. Today we're finally at the last mainline Zelda game I have to cover in this series, Skyward Sword, as I rank its bosses from worst to best. Now this was my first ever playthrough of the game, and I had a lot of fun with the Switch edition and its unique swordplay mechanics. The concept of using one Joy-Con analog stick to control the angle of my swipes took a bit of time to get used to. You can really tell this was a game developed for the Wii, but once the controls stuck, they stuck hard. The bosses of this game all have a lot of depth to their fights, but the quality is a bit of a mixed bag. In fact, the game reuses boss fights with 3 Ghirahims, 3 Imprisoned, and a Molderach mini-boss later in the Sand Sea. As for my ranking, let me just clarify a couple things. I will be ranking the Ghirahim fights separately, as I have different opinions on each one. The Imprisoned fights will be condensed into one entry, because it's the fucking Imprisoned, and I'll be pairing Levias and Bilocyte into one entry, as it's one massive fight, even if it's against 2 creatures. So without further ado, all 10 Skyward Sword bosses ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 10, we have the Imprisoned. I went into Skyward Sword knowing that this boss had a reputation as one of the most repetitive and annoying fights in the series, and I was expecting to fight him every other mission, honestly, but the game left a lot of time between the first and second battle, with the first taking place after the Temple of Time sequence, and the second taking place after the Fire Sanctuary. But then the third fight happens so quickly afterwards that it feels like they weren't spaced out properly. Still, I wanted to go in trying to enjoy the Imprisoned. I tried, but I just didn't find the concept of hitting the white toes particularly interesting, and I would often find myself on the wrong side of the boss after he fell, forcing a crazy sprint to actually reach the weak spot. Then, in future fights, his feet create red electricity, which makes popping those dogs extra hard. He gains arms, which he can use to climb the cliffs, forcing you to seek help from our resident rival Groose, which is the only positive part of these encounters, as we see Groose go from this pompous asshole at the start of the game to genuinely finding a purpose and helping Link seal away the Imprisoned with his Groosinator. It's a cannon you can move and aim as you please, which you can use to shoot the Imprisoned's hands to knock him down as he climbs. In the final fight though, the Imprisoned just decides to fly, forcing us to climb up to Groose ourselves and launch us from his cannon onto the head of the Imprisoned to finish it off. This is the coolest moment from any of these 3 fights, but I've just gotta say, after the 3rd time fighting him, I was just glad it was over. The concept of a timed fight where if the Imprisoned escapes the pit, you lose, doesn't appeal to what I like about these games, and so it ends up at the bottom of my list for being a repetitive slog, complete with, honestly, a really bad visual design. Like, this mole is meant to be Demise? Come on, how can a man with so much aura end up looking like an edgy Drillbur from Pokemon? At number 9, we have the pyroclastic fiend, Scaldera, boss of the Earth Temple. We first meet this guy just before the boss door, as upon collecting this game's equivalent of a boss key, a large boulder begins to roll after us Indiana Jones style. What we don't know though is that this is actually Scaldera. Ghirahim 6 him on us, and we have to use our newly acquired bombs to take the beast down. It starts with Scaldera climbing after us from the bottom of the ramp. You have to wait for its fire to die down, then throw a bomb at the boss's rocky exterior. This causes him to roll back downwards. Then you wait for the boss to inhale for a fire attack, and throw another bomb in Dodongo style, which stuns the boss, allowing you to search and attack its weak point eye. This pattern just repeats until the boss eventually walks over you, climbing to the top of the ramp so it can attempt to run you over as it rolls back down. Avoid the ball, bomb its mouth again, hit the eye, and Scaldera is done. If you have a full bomb bag, you can beat this boss without needing to climb to the top of the ramp to retrieve extra ammo, which was the case for me. There's just something very unmemorable to me about Scaldera. It's not a terrible visual design, but the boss fight itself doesn't do enough with the ramp, and most of my difficulty just came from me still struggling with the control scheme for bomb throwing. It's more complicated than in past games, please believe me. Which is a bit of a knock, as I'd rather the challenge come from the boss, not the controls. Though being a part of the Earth Temple when the far superior Fire Sanctuary exists later in game really just made this entire sequence so underwhelming in general. At number 8, we have the Abyssal Leviathan Tantalus, boss of the Sand Ship. In comparison to Scaldera, who does too little in its fight, Tantalus is a lot more involved, with an in-depth escape sequence from the engine room of the ship as you slice open tentacles and escape rushing water alongside a two-phase battle that, on paper, has a lot of detail. The first phase has Tantalus trying to spear you from below deck with its tentacles, which you need to shoot with the bow to destroy. None of the other weapons work here, but the challenge comes from needing to be in first person to fire the bow, leading to a lack of visibility that allows other tentacles around to sneak up and hit you. I found this more difficult than I expected, but it felt mechanically clumsy, with tentacles respawning extremely fast so that you had to have quick reflexes to cut them off. It was annoying because anytime you missed a tentacle, it would grab Link and force a button prompt to break free, which began to add up time-wise. Eventually, the main monster appears, allowing you to shoot the comically large eye, and the fight repeats until Tantalus smashes the ship apart. This knocks down a box, allowing you to climb to the upper level and the final part of the fight. Here, Tantalus's tentacle hair turns to eels, which rain down towards Link, forcing you to cut them off to get a clear shot on the eye, which is a really cool mechanic, but there's nothing difficult about it. You just stand back, swing your sword, and wait till there's a lull in attacks before shooting the main eye again and attacking the weak spot, which is fine for an early game boss. But this is the boss of a late game dungeon. The second phase should be harder than the first phase, not easier. So yeah, Tantalus is a longer boss fight, but that length is punctuated with an admittedly very boring battle, not helped by the absolutely Monsters Inc. levels of boss visual design, which is fine, but I wanted some eldritch sea creature, not this goofy-ass thumb. It's just such a non-threatening design, which is such a shame because the build-up of the ship getting attacked sets up this fight so beautifully. I could see some people calling Tantalus underrated, and I would understand, but even in the boss rematches you do later in the game, I still found Tantalus annoying, and I was stronger then. At number 7, we have the 1000-year arachnid, Molderach, boss of the Lanayru mining facility. Given the item we obtain in this dungeon is the Gust Bellows, a very unique tool in Skyward Sword Link's arsenal, I'm glad we have a boss fight that takes advantage of it in a cool way. Molderach begins by attempting to harm Link with her pincers, of which there are two. The left pincer is larger, the right smaller, but both have weak point eyes that our hero can strike to deal damage. The pincers will open at specific angles, with us needing to hit the eyes without bouncing off of the scorpion's carapace. If an eye flashes red, it's about to attack, and you need to dodge, otherwise you get caught in a grab. For me, the trickiest part was switching targets between the two claws, and just reacting in time to hit the weak spot, as some of my timings were admittedly slow. While a tad repetitive, I do enjoy this part of the fight. Once you destroy both claws, Molderach dives under the sand, forcing you to follow her with the Gust Bellows. You have to try and uncover the boss, which will force her back to the surface, where you can then thrust at her main eye to deal damage. But here lies the problem. She doesn't have much in the way of attacks at this point. You wait for her eye to turn red, thrust forwards, deal damage, rinse repeat until the boss dies. Molderach ends up feeling like a fight that ends prematurely. There needed to be a third part of this battle, or at least a second loop of all the mechanics. Like when it dives underground, it can regenerate its pincers or something. That would have worked wonderfully. Instead, Molderach just dies so fast, and I'm left thinking, damn, that sucks. Because I really like this boss and I want to rank it higher, but there's not enough fight to rank. It's even easier later when you refight it as a mini-boss in the Sand Sea. At number 6, we have the Ocular Parasite, Bylosite, fought in the clouds of Thunderhead. This is a really cool fight and the only battle in-game to really focus on using your loft wing. It starts with phase 1 against Levias, where you have to race after him on your bird and spiral charge into the various eyes sprouting from the whale. The aim is to destroy all of them, which allows you to land on Levias to take on the actual boss Bylosite. Phase 1 goes pretty quickly and isn't particularly difficult aside from steering your own loft wing, so it feels more like a prelude to the actual boss moments later. Once you land, you have to play tennis with Bylosite's attacks, but instead of the traditional energy tennis format where you bat attacks back and forth, here it's more like baseball, where you hit the projectiles to the left and the right to break Bylosite's frills. Doing this causes its massive eye to be exposed, which you can attack either by reflecting another projectile into it, using a Skyward Strike, or my method of just shooting it with a bow and arrow. This stuns the boss, allowing you to attack its weak spot, which repeats until the boss is down, freeing Levias. It's a very simple fight in terms of mechanics, but the combination of flying through the sky while avoiding enemies to destroy the eyes, followed by a fairly fresh take on the energy tennis formula with baseball, is enough to rank it higher than the other bosses so far. It took me a little while to realize exactly what to do as well by reflecting its attacks, which shows a nice level of difficulty. But the fight never gets any more difficult. Perhaps having false projectiles mixed in with the reflectable ones could have added a bit of fun to the proceedings, or having an extra frill that you have to hit when it's low on health. But as it stands, Bylosite's a great fight that I found more memorable than I thought I would. At number 5, we have Demon Lord Ghirahim's second battle fought in the Fire Sanctuary. Of all 3 of Ghirahim's fights, I think the second has the least impact for me, because with Skyview Temple it's your first introduction to him, and with the endgame fight it's your last encounter with him. By contrast, finding Ghirahim at the end of the Fire Sanctuary was a tad disappointing, I'll admit. When 2 of the 6 major dungeon bosses in this game are Ghirahim, you can't help but feel a little element of repetition set in. I play these games for the unique dungeons and bosses, so when one of them isn't unique, it's a real shame. At least Ghirahim's personality can carry this though. Most other Zelda villains would have me groaning if they were in his spot, but my Lady Ghirahim Divalicious Diva can do no wrong in my eyes. Let loose, Ghirahim, let loose! This fight is simply a harder version of his previous encounter, down to the same general progression of his abilities. You have to strike the 2 crystals he summons to break them, then by watching Ghirahim's hand, you attack him via a different direction to catch him off guard. Now you can tell from my footage I still didn't fully grasp how to stop him from grabbing my sword, but by the time at the boss rematches with Lanayru, I figured this fight out and stomped him in less than a minute. He summons more and more floating crystals, but if you find the right angle, you can hit him without even needing to break them, which feels fantastic, let me tell you. Phase 2, he summons 2 swords, with you needing to strike him from a direction they aren't blocking. He also summons a large series of crystals that you have to strike as they approach, one of which requires a spin attack to block, and he can jump into the air and come crashing down in an attempt to impale you, but this also leaves him very open for damage. Your mileage with this fight will come from how well you've adapted to Skyward Sword's precision swordplay, and I still think it's mechanically stronger than his first fight. I just don't think it should have been a dungeon boss. That's my biggest hang-up. It feels misplaced at the point in the game we're at. It shows Link's growth, sure, but you can't tell me you wouldn't prefer a wholly original boss fight for the Fire Sanctuary, with this Ghirahim battle being slotted in somewhere else. Hell, you could even make this the first phase of the final fight before he goes full Punch-Out on you. But little spoilers, while scripting this video, this entry was actually supposed to be number 7, but I realized how fun I do find the mechanics of the fight, and I bumped him up a few spots. You're welcome, Ghirahim fans. At number 4, we have Demon Lord Ghirahim's first fight, which takes place in the Skyview Temple. Taking the claim of first boss of the game, Ghirahim makes an insanely iconic first impression. From his clean visual design, to his ability to warp around in cutscene to taunt Link, to the iconic tongue, it's all there. Unlike other Zelda games where the first boss is generally a fight that showcases your strength, Ghirahim's first fight is all about him showcasing his strength. Most people will immediately have him grab their sword, yank it out of their hands, and throw it at you, which is terrifying at the best of times. You have to attack him in the opposite direction to where his hand is placed, allowing you to strike him down. He says it himself, if we attack like a novice with predictable patterns, we'll never land a blow, and this is a great forced tutorial for really utilizing Skyward Sword's swordplay to the fullest. His second phase has him summon a sword, which he uses to block one of the 4 cardinal directions, and you have to attack in any of the other 3 to damage him. Sometimes he'll charge at you with a sword slice that you can repel with your shield if you have the right timing, and sometimes he'll summon a row of crystals you have to strike to reflect back. It's the same mechanics as his fight in the Fire Sanctuary, and again, that is the more mechanically interesting battle, but something about Ghirahim's first impression and the way he's so clearly toying with us in this battle is just more striking to me from a story perspective. It tells such an interesting narrative where we're on the back foot with this eccentric man holding back a ton of power. The only reason he doesn't kill us outright is because we're not worth his time at this moment, and that's so cool to me. I'll always rank fights that tell an interesting narrative pretty highly, and this is the best example of that in-game. At number 3, we have Demon Lord Ghirahim's final fight, fought in the sealed grounds of the past. To even reach him, we have to fight through hordes upon hordes of bokoblins, moblins, and minions to reach the bottom of the grounds. And upon reaching Ghirahim, he raises Zelda into the air with a flourish and furiously transforms into his final form, a darkened black creature with hardened skin and a wicked punch. The first half of the fight sees us trying to knock Ghirahim down to ground level. To do this, we have to strike him with our sword, attempting to push him towards the edges of the arena. If we knock him off, we can do a fatal blow and deal major damage. At a certain point, he gains the ability to counterattack, flipping over Link if you fail to hit him with the correct angle, and resetting a lot of your progress. It builds on the ideas of his first 2 fights, while giving you some satisfying moments as you jump down and stab him each time you succeed. But the real fight starts when you hit ground level. Ghirahim summons his sword again, now going on the offensive. You have to parry Ghirahim's strikes, then use thrusting attacks to stab at his gem weak spot. And yes, my footage here is painfully bad. I really just couldn't wrap my head around his parry timings, to the point where I was honestly embarrassed. Had I taken it a little easier and not tried to attack constantly, perhaps I would have had a better time, but I'm also grateful for the personal difficulty, as this was the closest I came to losing any fight in this game, sans the final boss. For the last phase, he abandons the small sword, summoning a 2-handed greatsword that you have to parry, then attack to shatter it. This reflects Ghirahim's growing anger as he sacrifices the speed and skill of his prior moveset to just unga-bunga you really hard. And it's ironically the easiest part of the fight. A few well-timed thrusts later, and he goes down. Ghirahim's third fight is a proper 3-phase duel that expands upon what we've dealt with before, while also bringing some new concepts to the table so that he actually feels fresh, and that's exactly what I wanted from a repeat fight. But even with all his skill, Ghirahim is just the right-hand man, or right-hand sword, to our next entry. At number 2, we have Demise, the final boss of Skyward Sword. The true form of the Imprisoned, this flaming-haired demon with a face only a Kuma Street Fighter could love, is the main antagonist of not only the game, but the series as a whole. And what a fight this is! Demise, a cocky embodiment of strength who believes that it is his will to win this fight, claim the Triforce, and take over the land. He makes an entire gorgeous arena with a watery floor and a beautiful sky, just as a way to honor Link's tenacity, but he never thinks he'll lose. And it's one of the coolest arenas in the series, especially as it later gets stormy for the Skyward Strike phase and the final blow soon after. Demise will block a majority of your attacks in the first half, with you needing to prompt him to attack, allowing you to block his strikes, parry them, or dodge to the side to get some hits in. He's a very deft swordsman, and doesn't go down without one heck of a fight. Now, I had the Hylian shield, which is the best in the game, which does make this fight a lot easier, but you can still see I took a lot of damage while trying to learn my openings, which proves there's still solid difficulty here. Eventually though, you will knock Demise down, triggering the Skyward Strike phase, where both you and he have the power to use the signature technique. You have to combat his attacks with your own by raising your sword to the sky and charging up lightning. This can be brutal though, you best have potions because he hits hard, and you can only damage him after hitting him with the Skyward Strike. But I love the idea of charging the Skyward Strike with lightning, it's an extra layer of epic. After a short while, you knock him down, being given the prompt to finish Demise off, but the boss dodges out of the way, faking you out and forcing you to go again, with him being even more aggressive. This happens a second time as well, with the third and final fatal blow being the one to finish him off. The back and forth this fight presents between the player and Demise is what really solidifies it as a great boss battle, one of the best final bosses in the series, and that's impressive given it's a single phase fight competing with the same quality as fights with multiple phases from other games. Demise ends this by cursing Link, starting the cycle that every Legend of Zelda would follow from here on. He's the reason for Ganondorf constantly hounding the heroes at every step, and that lore drop is phenomenal. At number 1, we have the Ancient Automaton Koa Noctus, boss of the Ancient Cistern. It comes as no surprise, we all knew it would be here. Koa Noctus is the best fight in Skyward Sword, and a genuine contender for best boss in the series. Not only for its inspired visual design that perfectly fits the dungeon it's a part of, but because it truly took the concept of Zelda bosses from the older style and perfected it. That older style being a boss who is defeated using that dungeon's signature item. Koa Noctus starts in the center of the arena, immobile and with a host of arms that it can use to smash the player. I love the audio cues that hint on when you need to dodge, as when the audio finishes is when Koa Noctus slams. It adds an extra layer to the fight that I really appreciated. First up, you have to bait the boss into slamming its arms, which you can rip off with the whip to reveal its weak spot. Then you attack while avoiding the flying hand axes that it throws. This repeats until the boss gets fed up of our shit, growing a pair of legs so that it can now chase us around the boss arena. From here, its weak spot gets caged up and its 6 hands gains swords that it can use to slice and dice you. But if you bait it into slamming the ground and whip off one of those arms, you can collect one of Koa Noctus's swords and begin using it against the boss. That's right, the boss's own weapon is used to fight it. It's such a strong blade that it can sever Koa Noctus's legs and arms, halting its ability to fight back. Then you just break open the cage concealing its core and go to town. Koa Noctus does have an ability where it chases you down while swinging its swords rapidly, which requires running away to avoid, but if you get all of this down, the boss fight will swing in your favor. It's so intensely satisfying to cut off the limbs of this boss and reduce its aggression to naught. There are rarely bosses in these games that feel like that to fight, and it all culminates in one of the creepiest death scenes in any Zelda game. Why is Koa Noctus laughing like a little girl? We'll never know. But what we do know is that this is the best boss in Skyward Sword by a country mile. And that's my list. Which Skyward Sword boss is your favourite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. Next week, it'll be the Skyward Sword Dungeons video, and that will be the last of these singular game Zelda rankings. How crazy is that? I want to give a massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. It is $4.99 a month, you get a shout out in the description at the end of videos as well, and you sometimes get access to special Let's Plays that I upload just for my members. So thanks for watching, I'll see you guys next time, and adios!